Good, happy Tuesday morning, November 16, 2021. I'm Riley King. Welcome to this Tuesday morning edition of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. We have a lot of news to get to this Tuesday morning, so let's get started right now. First up, New Hampshire woman gifts handmade quilt to veteran she has never met. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9.
A heartwarming story out of Loudon this morning. This is Maureen Timmons. She sews quilts every year for the Fisher House in Manchester as a donation for their raffle. This year, she gifted her handmade quilt to a veteran she didn't even know. Friends say she is a selfless supporter of our military service members and of veterans. Great looking quilt there.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. .0 magnitude earthquake detected near Albany. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9.
If you thought you felt some rumbling near Albany earlier this week, you might have felt an earthquake. It happened Monday, about 3 miles southwest of Albany. We haven't heard of any reports of damage from this quake. Now, according to the USGS, this was the 5th earthquake to hit New Hampshire this year. Other tremors happened in Rochester, Canterbury, Sandwich, and Kentucky.
Okay, there you go on that video and that report. Former circuit court judge pleads guilty to 3 misdemeanor. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9.
What if smartphones were more than just smart? The all-new Google Pixel 6 with a 24-hour adaptive battery that sends power precisely where you need it. Google Pixel 6.
We thought that she should be held at a higher standard. She had pretty much our lives in her hands. She could make any decisions that she wanted on our lives that will never, ever be the same.
Disappointment and outrage from a group who filled the front seats at Superior Court in Nashua Monday for the plea and sentencing of a family court judge they say deserves to go to jail.
What Julia Introcaso did was a crime, and she was not adequately punished for what she did to the residents of New Hampshire.
This handwritten order is the crux of the case. In 2019, the guardian ad litem assigned to Robin Partello's case complained about payments being made via Apple Pay. Julie Introcaso whited out her own order when the Judicial Conduct Committee opened an investigation and then lied to the JCC.
While the JCC proceedings were pending, in an attempt to avoid responsibility, whited out those orders and it accused others in the clerk staff of perhaps having done so.
Introcaso took an Alfred plea, a court device that allows a defendant to plead guilty without admitting to the facts of the crimes.
I am not admitting to the facts of this case. However, I would like to enter a plea pursuant to Alfred with the court.
And I'm just extremely disappointed that the rest of the victims were not even given the right to speak in court.
Others who say they've been wronged by Introcaso say their fight for court reform is not over. A local lawmaker was in the courtroom today as well to support this group. For more information, people can email parentalequalitynh@gmail.com. Live in studio, Amy Cavino, WMUR News 9.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. How will $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill affect New Hampshire? Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9.
President Biden just signed the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill about 2 hours ago.
Well, that gives the green light for critical repairs to roads and bridges, including millions of dollars for New Hampshire.
So we asked the Commissioner of the Department of Transportation to join us for a live conversation about what's next for the Granite State. Commissioner Victoria Sheehan, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good evening. Great to be with you.
Now, New Hampshire is receiving more than $1 billion from this bill overall. How much will go towards roads and bridges, and when will New Hampshire begin seeing the impact of this money on the ground?
So the bill represents about a 24% increase in our road and bridge programs. And then in addition, it provides $225 million specifically for bridges. And so we're currently working with the Executive Council through New Hampshire's 10-year plan process to start to prioritize what investments can now be advanced with these additional dollars.
And there are more than 200 bridges, more than 700 miles of roads in New Hampshire. Which projects require immediate attention, and how do you decide which areas receive help first?
In New Hampshire, we have a very robust and transparent process to develop our 10-year plan for transportation. We've just concluded 22 public hearings across the state. So really, the passage of this bill comes at a perfect time. We now know what the federal funding will be. We have all of that public testimony and the public comments to review with the councillors. And in the first phase of the 10-year plan process, we'll be working with the Executive Council to develop their version of the 10-year plan. That will then go to the governor and then to the legislature for their input, and we'll hopefully have the bill signed into law by June, and that will be our roadmap on how to spend all of the funding, both state and federal, that New Hampshire receives.
Now, could this money put rail between Concord and Boston back on the table?
The department is currently advancing the project development phase of the Capital Corridor Rail project. And so prior to the passage of this bill, the department was already working to complete the design, the environmental permitting, and a financial plan for rail, so that really our elected officials in New Hampshire can make that decision as to whether or not we want to advance with construction. And so that work continues, and actually this week we do have a public hearing to update folks, especially in the Nashua and Manchester region, as to what the status of the project is.
And Commissioner, you mentioned the state's 10-year transportation plan. How will this money impact that plan? And are there any items outside of that plan that are now possible because of this funding?
So we're really hoping to advance a number of the projects. With these additional dollars, we can do projects sooner. We also had some projects where we were controlling the scope based on available dollars. And now hopefully, based on the public feedback we've received, we'll be able to right-size those projects and maybe expand the work effort to meet more of the community's needs.
One last question here. If you're just describing this to friends, families, neighbors as to why this is a good thing for the state, what would you tell them?
As commissioner, I hear a lot of advocacy for all types of transportation. And this bill, as I said before, increases our core programs. So in every area, we'll be able to spend a little bit more, whether that's on pedestrian or bicycle accommodations, addressing deficient bridges, working to improve pavement condition. We'll be working with all of our transportation partners to put these additional dollars to good use.
Commissioner Victoria Sheehan, New Hampshire Department of Transportation, thank you so much for joining us and shedding some light on how this infrastructure bill just signed into law by the president a few hours ago will help impact New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right now, save on holiday goods.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Kearsarge Food Hub supports hundreds of families. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9.
Helping to feed families in need. The Kearsarge Food Hub is running a silent auction, an online fundraiser through the end of the month. The nonprofit donates about 2,000 pounds of locally sourced food to 200 families each month. It also runs Sweet Beet Farm, which sells food from local farmers and offers discounts to veterans and those in need.
It will directly support families this holiday season. These funds that we raise from our community, from our donors, allow us to pay farmers for their produce, allow us to have jobs specifically dedicated to coordinating with food pantries.
Now, if the Food Hub raises $30,000 this month, a local donor will match it. You can find out more on the Kearsarge Food Hub website.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Concerns about staying warm raises as heating fuel costs increase. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9.
The Fuel Assistance Program opens December 1st, and that's a cold reality for some.
This year is very, very, very hard for many people, wondering how they're going to pay their fuel. And people actually haven't turned their heat on yet.
Community action programs urging people to apply.
Now, we go up to 60% of the state median income. So people think I don't qualify, you may qualify.
The maximum benefit is about $1,700. That as fuel and utilities are 30 to 100% higher than last year.
A $1,700 allowance is not going to last you all winter long with the prices if you're trying to fill a tank and those things. So a lot of our clients will just fill 100 gallons at a time, hoping to make it through.
Many vendors will work with clients to space deliveries or create a budget.
We also have other ways to provide some assistance. We have electrical assistance, our EAT program, which gives a discount. So when you qualify for one, you usually qualify for the other. Many of our community actions have other sources of funding that can actually help offset.
The New Hampshire delegation pushing to tap federal heating oil and gas reserves and an upcoming economic package.
That would continue the tax cuts that we started last spring for working families. It would reduce the cost of prescription drugs, lower the cost of child care, really focusing on the financial costs that people have right now.
And right now at the state level, there is some work being done to look to see if some of the federal COVID money could somehow be used to help with the rising costs. In Portsmouth, Jennifer Compton, WMUR News 9.
Maggie Hassan is pushing for tax credits that help.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Biden set to speak at Woodstock Bridge to talk infrastructure bill. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9.
Will you brace for the cold, or will you welcome it? Will you sit this one out?
That's right. The president is set to speak right here at the Pemigewasset River Bridge, which has actually been red listed since 2013. Now, the bridge will serve as the backdrop for President Biden's speech tomorrow, which is set to focus on how the infrastructure bill will help rural communities like Woodstock. Town officials tell us the bridge is in need of serious structural reinforcement, and the state has spent $250,000 on patchwork repair projects over the last decade. But now it's time for some larger repairs so the bridge can continue to provide safe access for logging trucks and emergency vehicles.
For fire and police and the ambulance to get to those homes, they would have to travel several miles down Route 3 to come across and then several miles back up to reach those homes. So it's pretty important that way. And also you have your school buses with children that live on that side of the river.
And preparations for the president's visit are currently underway. The bridge has actually been closed off to traffic all day long, while crews are now setting up a stage and a podium for President Biden to speak. We're live in Woodstock tonight. Scott Cook, WMUR News 9.
The president's focus on New Hampshire highlights the administration's efforts to reconnect with voters who, according to state polls, have an increasingly pessimistic view of the direction of the country. WMUR political director Adam Sexton spoke with Biden's allies, opponents, and analysts about the significance of this visit.
New Hampshire's crumbling infrastructure needs funding, and President Joe Biden will soon be on his way to the Granite State to explain how his newly signed bill will help fix it.
I think it's a great compliment to the Granite State that this is the first stop he's making after signing the infrastructure bill.
Former House Speaker Steve Shurtleff will be on hand to greet the president when he arrives. He says New Hampshire's share of the $1.2 trillion package is badly needed.
With more and more hybrid vehicles in this past year with COVID-19, people staying home, gas tax revenues have to be down. And so that means they can't reinvest the money that they'd like to in the Red Line bridges. So I think this influx of money will be a great help.
Dr. Wayne Lesperitz at New England College says the president, with his flagging job approval ratings in New Hampshire, has to explain how this legislative win in Washington is a win for workers.
There's plenty for people to like. There's plenty for them to rally behind. I think the challenge is that there is a message focused on infrastructure, and I think there's a challenge to connect that to what everyday Americans are feeling right now. The cost of food, the cost of gas in their automobiles. Everything is much more expensive, and I think that's their focus.
Ahead of this visit, inflation is also the focus of Republicans with an eye on the 2022 midterm elections.
We have the heating season coming up, and prices for natural gas and prices for heating oil are going through the roof. People are going to be deciding whether they're going to be paying their electric bill or their heating bill or cutting back on the food that they buy.
NHGOP Chairman Steve Stepanek says a lot of voters are just looking for someone to blame in Washington right now.
And that's Biden and our entire delegation.
In Concord, Adam Sexton, WMUR News 9.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Jury prepares to enter closing arguments in Rittenhouse trial. Let's take a listen to that video from ABC News.
All right, let's bring in trial attorney Greg Francis for more on the Rittenhouse trial. You know, Greg, let's talk about the prosecution. What do you think? Has it done enough to prove Rittenhouse guilty? And what do they need to do to cement that side in the minds of the jury right now?
Sure. Anytime there's a criminal prosecution, the prosecution has an uphill battle. They are attempting to build a case. They are attempting to satisfy the elements, each of the elements of the crime. And here, in this case, we know there are 3 separate shootings, so the elements for each one are a little different. They have done I believe certainly they've done enough to get to the jury. Otherwise, the judge would have already ruled on that. But they have a much tougher battle than the defense. It's easier to tear something down than build it up. So in this case, they have their hands full, but they have at least prepared a case that the jury is going to be allowed to consider.
So let's talk about that. You mentioned the defense. What do you think it will focus on in closing arguments?
I think that the defense, in this closing argument or summation will summarize those points, obviously, that are in their favor. I think they will play some on the youth of Kyle Rittenhouse in this case, and how, as a youth, how he could be afraid or scared or whatnot, despite the fact that he showed up to this scene with tactical weapons and body armor and whatnot. So they will focus upon that. They will focus upon his testimony because that was an opportunity for them to allow the jury to connect with this defendant. Many times in criminal cases, that's not the case, where the criminal defendant does not take the stand. But in this case, that was done, and I think it was done in this case because of his youth, to show the jury his youth, and to hopefully use that as kind of to buttress their argument that this was self-defense by a youth who was being attacked.
Trial attorney Greg Francis, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much. And as we mentioned, we will have full coverage of today's closing arguments when they begin at 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
Hi, everyone. George Stephan.
Okay, and there you go on that video. And that does it for this Tuesday morning edition of the Riley King Newscast right here on the Riley King Network. Thank you for tuning in and watching, and have a great rest of your Tuesday. Goodbye, everyone.